Welcome to Change the Narrative. I'm your host, JD Fuller.
I'm Susie Younger,
an African-American licensed psychotherapist.
I'm also a licensed therapist.
We talk about the isms. We talk about the phobias, anything that marginalizes and oppresses.
As a white woman, I ask the questions white people are too afraid to ask.
Everything we are not and everything we are is because of fear. Through a mental health lens, Susie and I will have difficult conversations with celebrity guests, political activists, and everyone in between. Our mind will tell us whatever we want to believe, but the truth lives in the body, and that's where change occurs. Are you ready to change the narrative?
Talk about changing the narrative. Our next guest, Zakiyah Ansari, is an inspiration. She has been named one of New York City's 25 most influential women in Brooklyn, and there are many reasons why. She is a parent of 8, an education rights leader, and a civil and social justice activist who is passionate about changing education for all bodies. She is the advocacy director and New York City director of Alliance for Quality Education, AQI for short, dedicated to ending systemic racism and economic oppression in New York City's public schools, where generations of Black, brown, low-income, and immigrant students have been robbed of what they deserve, high-quality education. Zakiyah is also a founding member of the Resistance Revival Chorus, an incredible group of humans who sing songs of resistance and uplift, born in the heinous months following the election of Donald Trump. Welcome, Zakiyah.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, so happy to have you. So I'm going to try to start out slow, even though I'm super excited and want to talk about everything at once. So I'm going to try to temper myself with my ADHD and not try to say everything at once. Okay?
I'm ready.
All right. So if you were going to map your journey, right, which is clearly a full journey, what would be the key markers? So I'm talking about from birth to now. If you were going to identify the key markers, like the defining moments, what would they be?
That is good. Yeah, I think from birth to now, it was, to be quite honest, like, see, my father was very abusive to my mom. But because of that abuse, it actually left me feeling insecure, which and dealing with a lot of low self-esteem. But I didn't know that's why. Obviously, you're a child, you don't realize that. So that was really a poignant moment, which got me to the place of understanding that I'm an empath. And when I was younger, I didn't understand how I was seeing things and other people would not see: a child crying, or someone laughing, or someone in the corner, a man yelling at a woman. And it would be like, I'd be like, did you see that? No one would see that, which then brought me to when I had my children. So the birth of my kids, and being involved in their education and just getting started in understanding how deeply politics was entrenched in that. And in the process of getting involved in that, in my 40s, while I was part of the school, a realization and understanding of why my conditioned tendency was to run from things and not run to things, which then led me to a career or a path of that's all I do is lean in and lean into structures of like white supremacy, white men in power, and still hold some of those low self-esteem, some of those low self-confidence tendencies as well, to being in the space of being an advocacy director of an organization I was actually volunteering for before I became the advocacy director. And so I really came kind of full circle, but all those things, I think if any one of those things were out of whack, out of place, they definitely would have shifted something in this journey that I've been on for almost 2 decades, for 2 decades plus, excuse me.
First of all, where are you 40? Let's start with that.
Where am I who?
How are you 40? Where are you 40?
I'm 54.
What? First of all, I got lost at 40. I was like, when I was 40, what? You lost me at that one, number one.
Next year, 55.
Man, you are a mystery to me. It's amazing. Second of all, the idea that trauma is what set you on this journey is so familiar to us in our work, and what you did with that trauma and how you deal with the triggers from that trauma is just such a great role model for people who have experienced something similar in their past. So thank you for that disclosure and being vulnerable. I truly appreciate that. Thank you.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so tell me about the ways in which you empower students around educational equity, because that's such a huge thing. There's
Mhm.
so much inequity. I mean, that's like you took off a chunk that's so huge. How did you get the focus to what you were going to do? Because it sounds extremely overwhelming.
Yeah, so it's kind of two things there. One is like I didn't plan on this journey, when my children, I have 8 kids. When I started, I only had 7. My son wasn't born yet.
Only 7.
And and then my daughter, like we was like working to pay the babysitter. And I was like, I have to start working. And then I started getting involved in the school. So that was like my youngest daughter. Before then, I was like engaged in school to a certain, like I went to parent teacher conferences like most parents do and those types of things. I didn't really go to PTA meetings, parent teacher association meetings or things like that. But the teachers knew me. Like I always made sure I knew them. But when that happened and I was wound up working to pay the babysitter and got involved is when teachers was like, you should join the PTA. So if this was not something I was like, oh, I can't wait to be on this journey, which is I'm really clear that this path was paid for me without me knowing. And so that was one piece of it, like, so being on this journey. And then the other piece is like young people are inspiring me all the time. Their fearlessness is like, whoa, I need some of that. And so I enjoy being around them. And so this work coupled with their fearlessness is really, they really like help me motivate me to like move forward and be in this struggle in a way that honors them and makes sure that they're safe. Because ultimately that's really that's what fuels me too. Like not just as a mother, like as an empath, like I want to take care of everybody. Everybody's got to be okay, And so that's been my journey of like being inspired by young people and hopefully doing the work to improve all their circumstances from from birth till they graduate, if they choose to go to higher education. That is really a goal and a mission of mine. And that's kind of a way I'm able to like do both. One is care for them, and the way I care for them is to fight ferociously for equity in schools, and hope that it sticks. And it's been able to have a little hand in some of that.
You bring up something that's so consistent in my experience of working in schools, which is parents from the global majority not being involved in the PTA, and then the school saying, well, they don't come to PTA meetings, right? It's like a double-edged sword. What would you say about that?
I mean, the thing that I learned, the plus for me is that when I got involved in the PTA was around the same time I was learning what organizing was. So the structures I didn't get caught up in the structures of being a part of the PTA. I'm the head of a PTA, like I'm this and I'm that. Like a lot of times folks get caught up in like as if they wield the power and they are all things. And so you should come to them and kiss the ring. Really, people get caught up in their heads around like being part of this. And so because I was learning about organizing and actually engaging and like facilitating meetings and like learning what that was and finding myself in the process, those structures never kept me from thinking bigger and wider. But even in those moments when I was in schools, what got me always was like, if I'm anywhere, what would make more folks want to come into this space? What would make me want to come into this space if I was just a parent coming to a school? Like, and it was coming out of that room and saying hello. It was greeting folks and just having conversations with people like, how are you there? I mean, how are you doing? And how's your child doing and what's happening? And so, I never got caught up in that. But guess what? Also, when we had those meetings and there weren't a lot of people, I made sure that meeting was the best meeting those folks were at. I don't care if it was 5. And I had been to many meetings before that where other leader parents and administration would be like, this room should be filled with parents. Why do we got 600 kids in the school and there's only 20 parents? And I always felt like, well, I'm here. So what am I, chopped liver?
Right.
Like, give me what you would give them, because at the end of the day, that's how it carries. It carries word of mouth. And so by understanding that and being in those spaces and understanding, right, that at some point people probably wrote me off as not a parent involved because we thought that the parent PTA was the place that people were supposed to be involved. Not thinking that parents got more than one kid, They got
Right.
more than one school. They have issues that they're experiencing. And the PTA does not define how involved you are in your children's education.
Yes.
I know that for sure. And so it's always been for me from day one to constantly say that to folks. Like in the very beginning, again, understanding I was learning how to organize while at the same time I was part of the PTA. I was like, I am going to be the voice of those parents who have not found their voice yet.
Mm.
And when they're ready, I'm here for it. We're
Mm.
going to go through this fight together. And I've seen it, and it's happened. The hundreds of parents were not there, but they were either inspired by myself, like I was inspired by somebody before me. And they start off small, right? And so these structures are things that we get caught up in, and we have to stop getting caught up in structures. They're put there to keep us silent. They're put there to say, these are the rules, and the rules never work for us. So we got to knock down the structures and the walls.
You know, you just struck a chord with me, both in you inviting people in is what you're talking about. You're talking about creating an invitation that works for more than just one type of parent. And I think that we have to look at the PTA as a piece of the structure in white supremacy. How do we not acknowledge that the PTA is a part of the problem? It's like, if you're not a part of the Parent Teacher Association, then you are the problem, not the structure itself. So I love what you're saying about that. And that just makes so much sense. You found a way to make parents, whether there's 5 or 50, feel welcomed and valuable, because word of mouth and relationship is what grows a movement. Yeah, that's pretty incredible. Well done.
Thank you. Yeah, Matt. Sorry, that's my youngest granddaughter.
No,
Looking for
don't
her
be
mother.
sorry about kids ever. Kids are
And it's so weird
amazing.
because I always tell people the same thing. I'm like, look, this is the world we live in right now.
That's
People
right.
got to take whatever they get. Fortunately, we got blurry vision background, so we can hide over like
Well,
fake
hey, look, if
backgrounds.
you want to bring that baby up in the screen, we are good with that, please.
She might come, but
No
right now
problem.
we're good.
There's no problem. So,
Yeah.
so the next thing is, how I learned about you, which is through Ray and Jill. I mean, they cannot say enough amazing things about you. And soon I learned why. So I, as soon as they said, you need to know, I was like, I want to know. And so I tracked you down and begged you to come on. And I'm so happy you did. Tell us about the Resistance Revival course.
Oh, yeah.
Let me add a more
yeah.
specific, because I know
Sure.
that's huge. Let me add a more specific focus. How does it inform the rest of your work? Because
I was about to, yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. Go for it.
That's why I had to sigh, because I'm like, yes, they have saved my spirit many days from being like in despair. This work that I do is, I say it constantly, it is psychological, emotional, and many times often physical abuse. Because to every day or every year, go to, Albany, or we're locally fighting for just the basic needs for equity. And to have people year after year, when you know it's not true, tell you they don't have the money, and you see other communities get funded, and you know that there's an absolute disregard for Black, brown, and poor children in this state and then in this country, it's painful. It is physically painful.
It's
So there's
painful.
been, it is physically painful, yes, and as well as psychologically and mentally painful.
Yes.
So with the chorus, many times there were days that I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm so tired. I was running up and down, getting around in New York City, going to meetings or whatever, mentally exhausted, but so excited to know that at 7:00 p.m. was rehearsal. I'm going to be there. If it was Saturday in the morning and it was it was a performance, I'm going to be there. I would move anything to make sure that I was there, because it was soothing for my soul, and it allowed me to get up the next day and say, I can do this again. And so I don't know how I survived this long without them, but it's an amazing group of women and non-binary individuals who just ooze of justice and activism and love and community. It's really a beautiful space, and most folks would think like that many folks together, women and non-binary people, that you would be like, what's all the drama? But it really is therapy and massage therapy and just like conversations, and the sister that I never had, and like or sisters that I never had. And just these folks who are doing music is, I love music, but I'm not necessarily a singer, as many of these folks are artists. Like, girl, let me tell you, these people are artists, they blow. And so I am also learning about what it means and how important how the justice piece of the work that I do just in general connects to music. Like, I didn't know, but it makes sense, right? Like how disenfranchised women are in the music industry across the board. So to be in a space where we intentionally, found women who were producers for our album, and the company was ran by a woman, and so that's one thing. And then we do the activism piece, which I am the rapid response coordinator for. So that's why we're in these streets as many times as we can, get people together for many different issues, especially issues that impact women, and transgender folks, and anything that's really on that level. Like, we're out in these streets if we can be there. So it's been a great, it's been really good for the soul. It really has.
You say joy, activism, and art, they go together, right?
Absolutely.
And so can you say a sentence or two about that?
Yeah, I mean, we coined the phrase of Toy Derricott, the poet, joy is an act of resistance. And I think in the beginning it has never been more poignant than in this moment of being in the chorus, right? Like, and the work that I do, the reason I love music is because in those moments before the chorus, and even now, that I needed to shift my energy. I needed to, like, think about something. I need to write something. That's where I go to. I go to music. I listen to Marvin Gaye or some Luther, depending on what I'm feeling like, right? Or I want to hear something more inspiring, so I might listen to the Chorus's album or someone else, right? And that allows me to get up and continue to resist, right? Like, joy is just something, as we as black and brown indigenous people, like that is just at our core of, like, music. I think of the time when the uprisings were happening with George Floyd in the streets, and people were doing the electric slide.
I love
right.
it.
And right, it was just like people were just like shocked, and I was like, yes, because that's how we get
That's
down,
what we do,
right? And then we go back out there and we, like, power to the people. We do it again, right? And so it is just part of who we are, I think, as black and brown folks.
When you talked about the pain, I felt tears come to my eyes, because it is daily pain. It is daily exhaustion. It is daily reminders that Black lives don't matter in white supremacy. And to try to convince white bodies that Black lives do matter and what that looks like, it's exhausting. And it's exhausting beyond human belief of the toll it takes on our spirit and our soul. And so the fact that you have found, your joy in the resistance is such a marker for who we are as a people. People always say, our sense of humor and, music and dance and what we do, that is how we continue the journey. Resilience is overrated. Right, because all that means is that you can keep hitting us and we can keep bouncing back.
Right, that's right.
And so I no longer call it resilience, but it is a factor of our humanity. It's the energy to our spirit. I think that's what you're talking about.
Yes, absolutely. Every day, and then it's the work, and then it's the explanations, and then it's like, in spaces where people kind of look over you like, what you gonna bring to this table? You ain't got nothing. And you got to lean into that. And, people try to explain what you said. I didn't say that. I know what I said when I said it. It's like these things, and you got to smile, and, or you can't be too mad, or, it's like, it's all the things. And you're right. It's like almost beyond what someone should be asked to bear. It's crazy.
It's true. And we have to tell that truth.
It's true.
We have to tell that truth, that this is dehumanizing. And it's not okay. And when you ask us to do something that is not in our spirit or is against our people, it's problematic. I experienced that this week, and every week, as a matter of fact, but this week in a realm that's different than the other weeks. And it compounds itself. So I love that you have found a way to replenish yourself. That's so important.
Yeah, it's a need. I realized that it took me a long time to realize that not only do I need to, I
That's
deserve to
that's
have
it
that
right
space.
there.
Yeah, yeah.
That's it right there.
Hmm.
So what does activism look like at home? Because you have a full house.
Yeah. I don't know. Like we talk about a lot of things, it's like certain kids you could talk to something. Like I have 8, so some are older, some want to talk about the politics and some don't. And all of them are really connected to themselves. Their father really instilled a lot of like their culture in themselves and understanding that. And in the world, you can't be blind to what's happening, right? Like there's different generations. So my son is 2000 and I have 80s babies and then 90s babies. So they're like,
Mm.
but there's still a through line to so much more pain than the other stuff that they all can connect to. And so I think a little bit of activism is like the joy part of it, right? Like how do we dance together, we sing together, we eat together, like all those things. So the joy piece is the activism piece. Like how are we able to have a conversation, a real honest conversation about what's happening, George Floyd or Breonna Taylor or anything else, or white supremacy in general. And then, like, let's watch a movie or turn on some music and just, lip sync some songs together,
I
like,
love it. I
so
love it.
yeah.
How do you talk to them about keeping themselves as safe as possible? We know the conversation.
Yeah.
Every Black parent has with their child.
Hmm.
How do you manage that in the face of what's happening in this country? And it's been happening in this country forever, but now we see it. Everyone sees it because we've known it.
My husband's really good at that stuff, the safe
Okay.
stuff. He's really conscious of that. And what I try not to do is like put the fear, because the Lord knows I'd be terrified, especially when found out I was having a boy. And so my son, I try not to be, and I try not to put the fear while also engaging in conversation that he can hear and be fruitful, because the fear doesn't help him and it sure doesn't help me. And so just like honest conversation. When my daughter, my daughters, one of my daughters was in, 2 of them actually was in high school, and one of them was going to the train station. I don't know why I never thought of this when they were growing up, that it would happen to a girl. Like I don't know why. Like like it
Yeah,
never
we were
dawned on me.
conditioned. We were conditioned to
And
think about it in terms of male
yeah,
Black bodies and not female Black
it's
bodies. Yeah.
true. And
Yes.
then so it was an incident with a school safety agent and all this stuff. And I was like, wait, what? And then another one was coming out of the train station and she was like, the police officer was so rude and cursing at her. And I was like, oh my gosh, like what do you do with that? And then it was that you realize, oh, they're not they're gonna get it too, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so it's just like open conversation, like having the conversation, any kind of conversation about all the things. Especially now after post-pandemic, I struggle with a lot of anxiety.
Mhm.
Trains are a little crazy too, the streets a little crazy too. And
Yeah.
so like even being nervous about going on the subway, I talked about it. And then my other daughter, my youngest daughter, is like, yeah, and she just, she's the one with the youngest grandbaby, so she's super nervous about getting on the train, which is understandable. Um, and my other daughters are like, don't worry, I'm good. I'm like, okay, right, So,
Yeah.
but it's like just having a conversation and trying to. I don't do it. I could do better at it, but trying to be honest about how I'm feeling. I think it allows other people to kind of share, it allows them to share. And the
Yeah.
other plus is that they have each other, they talk to each other. And so I
Mhm.
learned a long time ago that they're not always going to talk to me about all the things, but as long as they have someone to talk to. And I trust that the advice they're going to get from the other one is going to be good advice. Sometimes you're like, I know you got somebody to talk to, but that is not the person I want you to get advice from. But in this particular instance, since they're talking
Right.
to each other, I know that they're going to look out for each other. So
And talking about New York right now, I'm in New York and I'm working here temporarily. And, the mental illness is out of control. So I have my own inner conflict as I see all the money that's
Yes.
spent on all the holiday decorations. I'm down near Wall Street. That friggin' Christmas tree alone could feed so many homeless and house so many homeless people. As an empath, I don't know how to separate the two. I don't know how to separate all the money that's spent on celebrating one holiday when there's so many people. You can't walk through a street of New York without seeing extreme mental illness. The trains, there's more mental illness than ever. I can't even take the trains. So I'm feeling you on that. And it's so disturbing that I can't separate it from myself. You know what I mean?
It makes perfect sense. I just thinking, I'm going to use this as one example, but it doesn't matter. Like Bloomberg just committed $750 million for charter schools throughout the country.
Okay.
And how much more money did he make during the pandemic?
Exactly.
$750 million, we know, is already a drop in the bucket for him. I remember something, someone, I don't know if it was an economist, said like if all the billionaires gave a certain amount of money, they could solve war of hunger.
I know.
And Elon Musk was very arrogant and said something like, can you prove it to me and I'll donate. So it was something real arrogant.
He's such an idiot.
But it can happen. That's the problem. They have taught us how to stay in a scarcity mindset. They have taught us that, oh, well, those people out there, they just they didn't work hard, they didn't pull themselves up by their bootstraps, right? Not knowing that everybody's just a one paycheck away from being in the same situation. And the lack of care that we have for individuals to not even look up, to acknowledge, is just, that's another thing. That's another reason why it's hard for me to go out too. Like, I find myself, because of it being an empath, it is so difficult to pass so many people with their hands out and I can't give to everyone, that I find myself looking down, like, or avoiding. And then the guilt sets in, because I'm like, and it's so many men, and so many men of color. And I'm just like, what happened to dignity? And people want to live with dignity and respect. And that includes a house, that includes a job that pays a living wage, that includes a community that's not a food desert, right? That's some place that you feel respected, that you have health care, that you can go to the doctor when you're sick, either mentally or physically. Like, I just think of how we know Black men are raised to be strong and whatever, and sometimes to a fault, right? We're not gonna go there. But to be in a space now where who knows that person that walked in front of you that might look crazy to you, what he was before he got there. We've seen some of the films, like violinists or pianists or who are now, because whatever situation. And for us to see everybody in their full humanity allows us to use homelessness as the bottom, and then also accept having kids in cages, right? As if they're two separate things,
right?
And it allows, by us not taking care of folks who are mentally ill or housing folks who are unhoused, then it allows us to accept, or too many people to accept, that folks in cages is acceptable too. Babies in cages, children in cages acceptable. That's a problem. That's more than a problem. Yeah. It's like, and in the midst of a pandemic.
I mean, speak on it. I mean, like, you're telling the truth. The idea that, able-bodied Black bodies are dehumanized. So then you add mental illness and homelessness. I mean, in the eyes of white supremacy, they're throwaways. And when you ponder that for a second, I get so emotional at the idea that there's different layers of discarding Black bodies. I mean, there's so many different layers that it is part of the fabric of this America that everyone celebrates. So
I have to breathe through that. That's really, I'm trying not to cry, because
I'm really, already tearing up over here, sis.
That's really painful. And if I think, not to pile on, because there's a lot to be inspired by, and I'm sure we'll get to that. But
yes, we will.
That's why the work that we try to do in my organization, the Alliance for Quality Education, I always say education justice is racial justice, is so crucial.
It is.
It's so crucial that, those little babies that we see, they're excited and learning their ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, and they're reading, etc. And then they get in 3rd grade and they're forced to take tests and their lights get dimmed. They just strip. You can literally see the progression of kids walking at you, mommy, what's this? Mommy, what's that? Mommy, what's that? Mommy, what's that? And by the time they get into the grades where they're getting tested, it's like the love of learning is lost from them if there's not an educator in the classroom that's there to like continue to spark that, as opposed to sparking like, we're going to pass this test, and so we got to, you know, buckle down and get to it.
Right.
You know, and so that's why the work that we do just piles on, because we know one suspension for a child already puts them down the path of not being successful overall, right? And so we got to do better. We must do better.
Well, I agree. I appreciate what you do. I value what you do. I'm just so grateful that you're doing it. But talking about layers, there are so many layers to you and what you do. I am totally in awe of you, and particularly that 55, you're still doing it. You know, I am like ready to lay down, but I get up the next day and do my part of what I do, which, even though I'm a therapist, I'm an activist first, so I integrate it into my work. But the way that you find people and the way that they respond to you, how do you receive it? Like when I say I'm in awe of you, and I know I'm not the only one, there's so many. How do you receive that? How do you take that into your body and make sense out of that?
Yeah, it took me till probably 2 years ago to be able to begin to take it in, and it's still a struggle. But I, you know, before I used to be like, oh, you know, you know what I was saying,
Right.
and now it's just like, thank you, and it's hard, but you know, what I'm learning is like, folks who look at you and see you in that way, like people have to understand that you have to take those, you got to take your flowers, like you got to smell them, you got to appreciate them. And if I think about where I came from and where I am, you know, I am deserving of it. Even saying that is hard, but it's true. You know, like it was like this psychotic episode of like, you deserve it, but you know, one on the shoulder, another other shoulder is like, you deserve it, but don't get to get, and then and you're like, and I'm like,
That's great.
but yeah,
That's great. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're receiving it, because it's an offering. It's an offering, and
appreciate
I
that.
mean it sincerely.
Thank
But I
you.
love that perspective of you know, not laughing at psychosis, but the
Right,
idea
no,
of in
it's
and
like,
out, you know?
uh-huh.
Yeah. That's great.
And it's like in seconds in your head, it's like the whole thing is playing out, even though no one knows that it's playing out in your head. You're like, thank you.
Yeah, that's very real.
Let me get the right face
So
on.
that's great. So my philosophy is that the personal and professional is the political, and it seems that you live your life the same way.
Mhm.
Is that true? Yeah. So
Oh
talk about
yeah.
your version of that. You know.
I mean, first of all, it was when I started getting involved in education justice work, I had no idea, like so many other parents, how deeply politics was entrenched in education. I literally had no idea. So politics is just the nature of education on so many levels, from even being part of a parent teachers association, just being a parent. Like, what does that entail? Who gets to go here? Who gets to speak? Who represents? Who's running the meeting? Who's not? Do I step back? You know, like to the next level of even organizing, it's politics in that. Like, this is the chancellor, like who's better to have the conversation, you know, then don't start advocating for dollars. That's a whole nother level. Like that's really politics, right? And so that piece is just really interesting. But even just navigating the world of anything you want to change usually has a political edge to it. Even if you want to get graffiti off the walls in your community, there's an assembly person, an alderman, a council member, or something you have to build relationships with to make sure that it happens. When you're in school and you want to have a program that you may not be getting from the Department of Education, you go to an elected official as well to ask them for some discretionary funds to pay for those violins for those kids to have violins lessons, you know. Politics is everywhere, you know, and why it's so important, which is brings me to the conversation around like who represents you is important too, and it's actually allowed me to expand my knowledge base, which many Black and brown folks we know, and I used to be this person which would like, oh, I know that name when I go vote. I'm just going to take the name off because it sounds familiar. I remember he's been here for 20 years. I'm just going to vote for him again. Now I'm paying attention to who's voting and running. And I'm like, nah, don't run. And people are asking me, I'm like, don't vote. This is why, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And people, come to you. And it's really important to be an informed and educated voter. I learned that. I used to vote regardless. Like since I've been 18, I voted all the time, every time. But I wasn't informed. I was just checking that Democratic line and just going down and tick, tick, tick. So yeah.
So what would you say to this, growing contingency of Black and brown people who put the Democrats in office this time and were thanked so profusely, and yet we haven't seen what we voted for? What would you say to them that can encourage them to vote, because they're feeling discouraged?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, that's another reason to exhale and be like, that's another level of trauma that just got put on us because we went all in and said this, that, and the other. We got an opportunity and we ain't really got opportunity because a white man mansion and a white woman cinema is just like pulling the strings. It's such America, right? It's just such a profound connection, like to have this be happening in the midst of all that's going on.
Right.
And to really like have a president that's really, I don't think, fighting as hard as he could, and narrative around voting rights.
Right.
I don't know, I struggle with trying to convince people to get out and vote as opposed to like, I mean, I know last year I was just like, look, ain't nobody want any of them, but we got to get rid of this man. That was the assignment. The assignment last year was like,
that was the assignment.
Go, period.
That was the assignment for real.
There was we live to fight another day, right?
We could not live through 4 more years of
there was no way
back to back.
There was no way. And also, is it a moment to motivate and inspire other folks to jump in the ring? Like you got a Corey Bush. When we want more of those, you got an AOC, you got a Jamal Bowman, you got like Ilhan, you got folks who are really standing their ground on what we need and not, giving in. How do you become one of those folks? How do we inspire more folks to run? And not just for those offices, but school board elections and all those other things. Like we have young people who are just so powerful, even in high school now. Like how do we encourage them and inspire them to want to do some of this? Stacey Abrams, I think, will inspire some more folks to continue to do that too. We have to vote for sure. I just struggle with trying to convince someone. I work with just a brilliant young Black woman, and she was just like, I am not inspired to vote, but I will not tell other people not to, And I respected that. Like, what am I going to do? Like, this was so many people there's so many examples that they can throw right in your face and be like, you see, we voted, we did this, and what do we get for it? It's like, so I think it's more or less like I just encourage people to like think deeply, continue to vote, right? Just vote. Like I don't, that's not my choice to tell you who to vote for, but we fought long and hard for these opportunities. And if it's somebody you don't like in there, run or get somebody else to run and vote those folks out. Like this is a moment to like really organize ourselves to because 2024 and to be quite honest, this critical race theory boogeyman that they're throwing out there is their way to get folks into office like they've already been doing. The midterms as well as the presidential election. So we have to be paying attention because it comes in different ways. They say it in a different word. It's still a dog whistle. It's still all the same things that we've been experiencing for the last, probably definitely before I was born. This year is CRT. Next year probably would be the same thing. But we got to keep our eyes wide open because they're coming for. They really want to make America bring it back.
Yeah, it's so true. And I love what you're saying about motivating and empowering youth to get up and take the positions so that they can make the difference that they talk about. Because what I hear sometimes, like the debates I've gotten into, is we need a third party, so I'm not voting. And it's like, yeah, but that's what would get Trump 4 more years. So what are we going to do right now just to pause the train? Because we can't, as a spirit, take 4 more years of that back to back. So I love what you're saying about that.
Yeah.
So would you mind if I ask you about your spiritual beliefs and how you integrate that into the practice of your activism?
Sure.
That's the question.
Yeah. You know, being a Black Muslim woman, like all those things are not necessarily celebrated or looked at as positives necessarily, right? They come with a lot of stuff, but that's who I am, and so that's all I can lead into spaces. So when I walk into spaces, and believe it or not, I am very much an introvert. I do not, if I don't have to talk, I
Really?
don't. So many times when you see me, you'll see me with chains that have words on them, shirts that have words on them, pants that have words on them, because I rather not talk, but also I have there's things I want to say to the world. And so I walk into spaces with the words on me. And so like I have chains that say worthy or respect, resist, right? Because the worthy one I really got was because one, it was to remind me of how worthy I am, but also when I go into schools, it's to remind young people and others that they are worthy. They are worthy of justice. They are worthy of anything they want, their dreams to be fulfilled, all those things. And so I'm very much an introvert. But when I walk into spaces, I am a Black Muslim woman, and that's not to be denied. And so I carry the level of like dignity in that, um, even though I do struggle with low self-esteem. Like it allows me to like walk into a space reminding myself of who I am and how I carry myself. um and it has benefited me. Like people know who I am. They respect what I do, how I carry myself, and my message and narrative, and that's really important. I think it knocks away stereotypes. I know it does,
Sure.
of what a Black Muslim woman can do, or just like what do they have to offer. Even though, look, I've been in spaces, people know who you are, and it still doesn't matter, right? They still try you. But which is so, I think all that I am just it empowers me, and also being a mother too, like this, like I want to represent. I represent when I walk into space. I don't just represent me. I represent my family too, and so all those things allow me to just like stand up a little straighter, lean into spaces, um, and also engage with other Muslim brothers and sisters in this struggle. There's not many, and so when we're together, like there's a way to connection, and not only are there not many of us in this struggle right here, like specifically, not a lot of Black African American Muslim folks in this struggle, especially as it pertains to education justice. So it's like really wonderful to, it's almost like a beacon. Like I get to walk in, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, we kind of spot each other, from across the room or whatever.
It's
It's
the
really
nod.
beautiful.
It's the nod.
It is. It is. It is. Exactly.
You know, you there's so much, we could go on for a long time, so I have to make sure that you agree to come back,
Oh, of course.
because you have
Absolutely.
so much to offer and share, and this is so empowering for so many people. I love the idea that you walk around with this sense of being, and you are the beacon. So how do we get this sense of low self-esteem out? Because I can't even stand that you're still walking around with
I
that,
know.
given
So
all the trauma.
I was fortunate enough to be an Atlantic Fellow, Racial Equity Fellow,
Okay.
and I got a coach, and so the coach was helping me work through that, because I constantly talk about that, and I don't know, it's much better than it used to be, but it's still
Good.
there. There's still tinges of it, right? And so she told me to actually practice saying, I see you, because now I can recognize, I can almost feel when it's coming on, those moments of self-doubt. And
Okay.
so she said, literally say to them, I see you. I see
Mm.
you. How you doing? Like to acknowledge that it's there,
Yes.
which would seem really weird, but it was really helpful.
That's great.
And so now when it's coming, I in my head, I'm like, well, are you not doing this because you doubt that you can do it, or are you literally not doing it because like you can't, or there's some really valid reason for not doing it? That wasn't there before. And
Oh,
so I'm
great.
still working through that piece of like, I think you're doing this because your friend is here self-doubt and you need to say hey and tell them to like, you don't need them right now. But
That's great.
also she, she helped me unpack of what has it done for you? Like, why has it been comfortable, which is helpful too. Like, so, oh, this is why my friend been self-doubt, been helping me out all
Mhm.
this time, keeping me safe and comfortable in this little position. And it feels nice and warm and cozy. And I don't know if I'm ready to, get into the world without Mr. and Mrs. Self-doubt over there. So
Yeah.
I'm working through that. So
That's great. I love that because, you're working with the positive self-talk and you're also embracing the existence of this in terms of I recognize you're there, I see you, and I'm not giving you the same power you once had in my life. I think that's all great stuff. I think it's important. I, as an African American woman, want to mirror nothing but confidence and self-esteem for you because you deserve it.
thank
And
you.
I see you and I want you to feel that
Thank
deeply.
you.
Yeah,
Thank
for
you.
sure.
I do. I
I mean
do.
that sincerely. So in terms of your ability to pull people together, right?
Mm.
You have this ability to pull people together, and it's sort of in this historical perspective. It's like, it's like what's been done forever. Civil rights movement, before the civil rights, enslavement. It's just what we do as a people. It's very collaborative, which is from the African American culture and all global majority people in general. And it's that in comparison to the individualistic, which is the white dominant culture's sort of way of moving through the world. Is it intentional? Was that conscious?
Oh
Is
my
that
God,
something?
I love doing that. I just realized. So I went, another story. So I
I
participated in a
love the stories.
training called BOLD, and you might have heard about it, Black Organizing for Leadership and Dignity in 2016. It's a phenomenal leadership development program for folks who identify as Black, right? So you can be Afro-Latino, but you have to
Mhm.
identify as Black. Changed my life forever. And part of that, I lost my train of thought, that 50 something. Part of it, sorry, there was a naming ceremony. And there were a
Okay.
few folks who knew me before, but many of the folks didn't. And so I was so honored to have this name. And I think it's so perfect. At first I was like, oh my gosh, I literally started crying. So they named me Queen Mother Who Holds the World.
Oof.
And
That's
I'm
powerful.
like, that is me. That is so me. Like it gives me, sometimes I always often ask people, even at work, I'm like, oh, what gives you butterflies? What's that thing that you like? Oh my gosh, when I talk about this or when I, do this, this is the thing I want to
Mhm.
do in my life. And that is that is my thing, like caring, bringing people together, being a bridger, but also listening and like, you know, that just it just I don't know where it comes from. I think it's part of being the empath, right? And being a caregiver, and also um like just my desire to want people to be happy. Like I want people to be not even happy is not the right well, like
Yeah, wow.
emotionally, physically, like spiritually well. And I think in a caring piece. And so I think that's where it comes from. And so that's why it's automatic for me. It's just I try to do it wherever I go, like build connections or just connect to somebody. I'm really good at feeling people's energy,
Mhm.
and so many times people come into the space and I'm like, "You good?" Even on Zoom,
Mhm.
and people will be like, "Yeah, I'm good," and then I'll like message them and whatever, and they're like, yeah, so and so. And I'm like, okay, I thought something was up because your energy is off. But it took me a long time to like embrace that was a thing. I thought it was like I was like going crazy. And so I'm like learning all these things, and my gut has gotten much stronger. I trust it more. I
Mhm.
didn't trust it before 2016, I think, as much as I should have. So I trust my gut when things are happening, even though people might sound crazy to other folks. my gut has really been saying stuff. And I think over the years, I didn't trust my gut because the self-esteem was like raging in my ear.
Right.
And so really started to trust my gut on this. And so all the things in my gut tells me like this is what I'm meant to do and what I want to do and what gives me joy. And so I'm just going to lean into it instead. I used to apologize all the time, like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm like being motherly, aren't I? And people would
Mm.
always say, no, it's cool, it's cool. And I would be like, Zakiya, like slow your roll. But I realized that I'm good. This is what I do. Like and people appreciate it. And I'm not going to apologize for it anymore, you know?
Well, it's more than what you do, it's who you are. You know,
Mhm,
people will say to me all the
mhm,
time, stop therapizing me. I don't know
mhm.
that I'm doing that. This is who I am.
Right, right.
I can't turn it on and
Got
off.
it. Right.
Right. So this is who you are. You're not doing anything.
Mhm.
It's literally who you are. I just want to add one thing before I ask Susie if she has any questions, which is please remember to be held as much as you hold,
Mm,
because
that's my
that journey,
struggle.
I'm
I
about to
appreciate that.
I'm about to tell you, you know, next 5 years, it gets rougher. I've been
Mhm.
at it a long time,
Mhm.
and I'm starting to feel the wear and tear at 62. I'm
Mhm.
starting to feel it.
Mhm.
So I want to see you doing what you do as long as you can. So allow yourself to be held. Remember to be held. See yourself and others that see you the way that they do, because that's really important to continue to give you the energy, because it wears on you, sis. It really does. I'm not kidding.
Yeah,
Please
no,
just remember
yeah,
that.
that was one of the things we unpacked at Bold. We had to create a commitment. I've had a few over the times, but my most recent commitment is I am a commitment to loving myself unconditionally and offering myself as much grace as I offer others. Mm.
I love it. I love it. So do you have any questions for Zakiya?
No, I just want to say, I mean, first of all, just watching the two of you have this conversation is so powerful. And if my white face brings in any other viewers, I hope that it does. The two things. One is the externalization of self-esteem, right? What's it doing? Here's some power, power. Put it back in you. You have it. It's yours. No one can take that away from you. And the other thing is just like really gratitude. Thank you for doing what you're doing.
Mm.
And you really are. You're incredible. Oh, the other thing I know, the shirt, the clothing, the
Oh.
words. I
Mhm.
love that. And I know JD does that too. And she wears her shirts with her words. And I'm sitting
Yeah.
here thinking, well, as a white person, what words should we be holding on to? What word do I want to go get
Mhm.
and walk around
Mhm.
with? So thank you for that.
Well, thank you both. This has been wonderful. I was not a talker, and over the years have really, that's another thing that I really leaned into. At first, I used to shy away from it, but now I lean into it and I really run towards speaking. And often, sometimes I'm, especially with the chorus, people are like, oh, you want to say anything, Zakiya? You want to do an interview? And I'm like, yep, I'll do it. I
All
ain't got a
right.
problem. I'm there for you, whatever it is. And that's been a real kind of eye opener for me to I really enjoy doing that. So
That's awesome. Well, there's so much more we could talk to you about. And so again, I want to get it on record that you promised to come back.
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
Awesome. And it's not like you're not changing the narrative every day, but I would love to hear a final word from you in terms of what changing the narrative means to you, because that was the whole purpose for this podcast in the first place,
Mm-hmm.
is to get people thinking about what's their part of changing the narrative. What can you do? You're already doing it,
Yeah.
but what would you like to say about that?
Yeah, I think changing the narrative. Wow, there's so much. I think one is, and not in any particular order. Um, just because you have not experienced it doesn't mean that it's not happening to others.
Mm,
Um, and so I think that's a lot of times folks are like, I use as an example, because Officer Bob in your neighborhood has been to the cookouts and brought Johnny home when he might have got, in a little trouble, and you can't see him doing anything like what we see police officers in our community doing, doesn't mean that it's not happening. And if you think that if that happened to your child, you would be outraged, and you should just be equally as outraged if it's happening to someone else in their community, right? The other thing is the importance of taking care of yourself. whatever that means to you. Like, write it in your calendar book, document it. That includes going to the doctor. That includes doing those yearly visits, getting that colonoscopy, right? Like all those things talk about they're part of care. They care for self. You're taking care of others, right? If you're well, your family knows you're healthy. You'll be around longer. Things that, again, in the line of something that might not be experiencing, but you see others. Find a way to give and support, and reach out to community groups that are doing work in your community. You don't have to go far. You Google everything else. Google a community organization that's doing something and just see, hey, how are you doing? You don't have to volunteer time necessarily. Maybe it's money, right? And I think one other thing is, for white communities specifically, like when you go into spaces, you might not be welcomed. And you have to breathe and figure out, are you ready to like really help? And you're gonna just run because someone may not have been cordial to you because there's a lot of pain there, right? There's a lot of trauma. Or are you gonna sit down and figure out and come back again and learn, right? Not necessarily talk. You don't always have to talk, but to be in space and learn and hear what people are saying, right? Because sometimes y'all take up a lot of space in spaces that are Black and brown, and we want to include other folks in our conversations. But sometimes it's really important to just listen and understand that you might not always be welcome the first time or the second time or the third time. The really onus is on you to figure out how hard and how much you really want to help and support and be involved in this. Because if you do, then you're going to have to take the bumps and the bruises, just like the community on the other side has been doing, taking the lumps for a long time in order to get to a place where there's actual conversation and movement and side-by-side advocacy that can happen. I believe in the power of we. I ain't gonna lie. Like, we got a 30-year victory this year. People told us stop fighting. They told us you ain't never gonna get this money. It took us almost 30 years to win $4 billion in New York State, but we did it in the midst of a pandemic when people told us we ain't gonna do it. So it can be done. I believe in the power of we. This organizing thing is a marathon. It is not a sprint. And I didn't know that in the beginning, but it is absolutely a marathon. And that was just the first leg for us at the at AQE. We're in the second phase of that marathon. That's accountability implementation. So we need more folks on board with us. And there's a lot of organizations doing the work around this country that need more folks on board. We need more warriors in this work, which is why it's so important for you to care for yourself, as JD reminded me.
I love it. And comfort is overrated.
Woo. I don't know what that is.
I don't either. Well, you are amazing. I've said it once. I'll say it 10 more times before we finish the podcast. This was just fire. Thank you so much, Zakiya.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you, value you. I won't make you feel as uncomfortable by saying it 10 more times, but I will end on that note. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Take care.